Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a Soul Flare Dragon Volcanic test stand video. So I'm really excited to do this one for you guys because this is actually a Patreon request test stand video for Izzy, and Izzy requested for me to make a deck based around one of my favorite classic monsters in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh, which is Soul Flare Dragon, which is an amazing card and is a really interesting card that I used to play a long time ago, but it's really cool to see how you can actually incorporate this card into a new deck. And I'm really excited to show you guys this deck because it's actually really interesting because it functionally works like a Volcanic deck, but then surprises your opponent with a Soul Flare Dragon and a couple of other tech cards to be able to lock your opponent down and totally be able to take the game, which is really cool. So thank you so much, Izzy, for requesting this one. This is going to be a really exciting one for me because I love Volcanics, and I know Pain 98 is, or 96 is going to be down in the comments down below, and I'm really excited to see everybody's reaction to this one because this is going to be a fun deck. So without further ado, guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below, just like Izzy did, for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name in the description of a single video, getting a signed card in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your Patreon along with test hands. So give Izzy some love down in the comments down below, and we're going to get straight on into this. And like I said, basically this functions kind of like a Volcanic deck. I mean, the core cards are Volcanic, but you kind of had to make a deck around this and see which way that you could make the card work the most. And I figured Volcanics was a great way to start because it is arguably the best Pyro archetype that we have right now currently, so I figured I would throw it in here. And there's actually some really neat interactions in this deck with the Soul Flare Dragon. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pile shuffle the deck out and go ahead and see what we can do for some test hands. Now, in play testing, I could summon out the Soul Flare Dragon in the first turn probably about 8 out of 10 times. It just kind of depended on the opening hand because it's very, very easy to get into that card and get into some really amazing techs in the deck that can get it out fast, which is what's really helpful. And there's a lot of cards that help back up a 1500 attack point monster that's basically just doing 500 points of damage to your opponent during each turn, which is pretty good actually. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Magic Planter, Soul Flare Dragon, see right there. One copy of Magic Cylinder, another Magic Cylinder, and a copy of Foolish Burial Good. So as you can see, the deck actually does, you do hard draw it sometimes, which is fine, but you do also add the Magic Planter to help you draw into it. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. It works very, very simply. Like, it's a very simple deck in the way that it actually functions. So what you're going to do with this hand is you're going to try and bait the Ash with the copy of your Foolish Burial Goods. And the only real target that you have in the entire deck that you're going to try and send to the graveyard is the Blaze Accelerator Reload. If you guys are unfamiliar with what this card does, and if you guys want to check out the deck profile, it is down in the description below as well. But what this card does is this card becomes Tri-Blaze Accelerator while in the spell and trap card zone, and then during either player's main phase, you can send a Volcanic card from your hand to the graveyard, and if you do, you draw a card. You only affect this card once per turn, and then during either player's main phase, you can banish this card from the graveyard to send a Volcanic card from your deck to the graveyard. So I'm going to send that to the graveyard, and I have some really great backup plays here. So we're going to go ahead and set the 2 copies of the Magic Cylinders on our field, and normal summon out that Soul Flare Dragon and pass against our opponent, which if you guys are unfamiliar with what this card does, what it does is that this card cannot be attacked if there's another Pyro monster on the field, which is why it works so well with a Volcanic deck. And then monsters are on your side of the field, or this card inflicts 500 points of damage to your opponent, its life points during the end phase of your turn. So every time I end my turn, you're taking 500. It works kind of like a Flare Metal a little bit, and it might be the precursor to what Flare Metal was, or is, which is really kind of cool with the burn effect. So we're going to go ahead and pass our opponent. They'll take 500, which will be the first time they take 500. And then when they pass and they go to their turn, during either player's turn, the Volcanic or the Blaze Accelerator Reload can go off to be able to, during either player's turn, during either player's main phase, you can manage this card from the grave to send any Volcanic from your deck to the grave. So I can use this card at any time during my opponent's turn to be able to send from my deck to the graveyard a copy of Scattershot, which Scattershot will go off and send another copy of Scattershot, and then it will go off and send another copy of Scattershot to blow board, because whenever this card is sent to the graveyard, you inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent, and if this card is sent to the graveyard for the effect of a Blaze Accelerator card, you can send 2 Volcanic Scattershots from the hand or deck to the graveyard, and then destroy monster opponent controls, all monsters that they control. So you can kind of hit them and board wipe them to protect your copy of the Soul Flare Dragon, which will inflict another, and I'm using this in increments of 500, will inflict another 1500 to your opponent, so they've lost 2,000 against you already, and they've only probably normal summoned or set up maybe 2 monsters against you. Now, if you let them attack into you instead, you can go ahead and use your copies of Magic Cylinder. And if you can inflict to them 4,000 damage between the 2 Magic Cylinders, you automatically win, which is very simple to do in this game. So we're going to go ahead and draw for turn, and we draw into another Soul Flare, which we can normal summon. Now our opponent can't target either one of these for attacks, and I end my turn, and you take 1,000 points of damage, which puts you at 3,000 that you've taken off of just the Soul Flares and the copies of my Scatter Shots, which is pretty cool. So you've already lost 3k, so all I have to do now is 5,000 with both of my Magic Cylinders, which is basically the premise of the entire deck. You can include more burn cards in here if you want to, but then it starts to take away a little bit from the Volcanic engine and the consistency of the way that this deck actually plays with your copy of your Blaze Accelerator Reload, which is pretty good for this deck. It actually works really well. And you also have some really neat cards in the deck as well that are techs, like your copy of Double or Nothing. It's not just a burn deck, it actually works better than a burn deck because you can summon out cards like Utopia Double and use cards like Ties of the Brethren to be able to throw them out on your side of the field, multiple copies of Pyro Monsters to be able to protect your copy of your Soul Flare Dragon. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next one and see what we can pull off. Because as you can see, it's pretty consistent right out of the gate, which is what's really cool. Now, even if all you do is draw a couple of Floodgates, you're still fine. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next one. Soul Flare Dragon right there. It might be my soul card. One copy of Scatter Shot, another Soul Flare Dragon, the Barrier Statue of Infernos, and a copy of our Volcanic Rocket. So the first turn, I would definitely normal summon that copy of Rocket, and sometimes you will have a weaker hand like this. It does come up where you have a little bit of a weaker hand, and that's okay. You still have plays that you can go off with this card, which is what's really nice. So we're going to go ahead and send that to the graveyard, or we're going to go ahead and set this card to our side of the field. And pass turn. When our opponent goes, we're going to go ahead and flip the copy of the Blaze Accelerator Reload, which has the ability that when this card is in Spell and Trap Card Zone during either player's main phase, I can discard a Volcanic or send a Volcanic from my hand to the graveyard, which can be the Scatter Shot that I already have to be able to board wipe again, which will inflict a total of 1,500 in increments of 5. We're going to use it right there. And you're going to go ahead and send 2 more copies of your Scatter Shot to the graveyard, which is going to be great because you're thinning out the deck to be able to draw into some of your other really amazing cards that's going to help you out a lot. So we're going to go ahead and send that to the graveyard, send our 2 copies to the graveyard to be able to board wipe our opponent, and then we just basically pass back to us because they're not going to probably be able to respond to it. And we get to draw a card, which is going to be really helpful as well. So we draw into a Slicer, which is not going to be super great because it kind of turns our Ties of the Brethren off a little bit because we have 2 of the really good targets in our hand. But we're going to go ahead and draw into turn, which is another copy of Volcanic Rocket. So we're going to go ahead and normal summon out to our side of the field the copy of Soul Flare Dragon, and then you can use your copy of your Reload that lets you send any Volcanic from your hand to the graveyard. So we're going to go ahead and send a copy of Slicer to draw a card from our deck, which is the Storing Mirror Force, which will protect our copy of Rocket, and then turn our Soul Flare Dragon to set up, which is pretty good. So now that we've set up this field, our opponent's going to take another 500, and then if they decide to attack into us, we can just activate the copy of the Storming Mirror Force, and we can also send this from hand to grave to be able to draw another card, which is unfortunately the Double or Nothing, which turns off our copy of our Utopia Double, but that's fine because we have the other copy of the Soul Flare in our hand that we can just normal summon to our field during the next turn, which is really helpful. So let's go ahead and go into the next one. Sometimes you will get a little bit of a dead hand, but even with that dead hand, we had cards like the Blaze Accelerator Reload that's able to just board wipe our opponent with the copy of our Scatter Shot, which is pretty good. Now, the only thing that kind of made that better is if we had a shell in hand to be able to start thinning through the shells and being able to not draw into them, which would have helped out a little bit more than drawing into like a Slicer or something like that, but that's okay. You just got to make sure that you pile shuffle the deck and make sure that your copies of your Scatter Shots are all in different places before you start the duel, which is really important to be able to let your opponent cut, but also shuffle the deck up enough to make sure that they're in different places, because if they're all stuck together and clumped together, you're going to draw on a 3 and it's a brick, which is a little bit unfortunate. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck again and see what we can get. So we're going to go ahead and draw again, and we're going to get into a Summon Limit, which is usually a really good card to draw. a copy of Double or Nothing, Magic Cylinders, Storming Mirror Force, and a Soul Flare Dragon. So again, see, we're constantly drawing this card. I don't know how I'm doing this. That's like ridiculously good. Like I get it all the time when I play test this deck. I either get this and a Pyro, or I get a Pyro and a Ties of the Brethren, or I just hard draw this card. I don't know. So you can do really simple stuff here. You can normal summon the Soul Flare, set 3, or set 4, because technically the Double or Nothing is going to kind of be dead, so it can kind of bait your opponent. Normal summon the Soul Flare and pass. Make sure you play around the Mech Knight right there. And then when you pass your opponent, if they do anything against you, you have the summon limit that you can activate right at the beginning of the turn to kind of slow down their game a little bit, or you can hold the summon limit if you want to. I like to go ahead and activate the summon limit, and then when they attack into you, you can go ahead and Storming Mirror Force them, and they'll take that additional 100 or that 500 off the copy of Soul Flare. So when we draw on the turn, we're going to draw into a shell, which is not super helpful in this situation, but you also have the Magic Cylinders. You can link summon if you want to, just by normal summoning it to your side of the field, because we do have stuff like the copy of IP. We have stuff like Cerberus, Phoenix, if you need to in certain situations. In this situation, I probably wouldn't use it. I probably would just hold on to this card and pass again, doing another 200 because I have the Magic Cylinders as well, just holding on to that card. If we draw into the next turn, we draw into a Phoenix Chain, which can kind of slow the game down again a little bit more. But at that point, you're not going to have anything else, so you might as well normal summon the shell to at least bait out 1 attack or 2 attacks with the copy of the Magic Cylinders. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next one. Which, as you guys can see, the deck is fairly consistent about getting Soul Flare Dragon to your side of the field to be able to kind of pop off from there, which is really nice. Like, I really like that. I really like the aspects of this deck that is basically Volcanics with a really awesome, like, tech card in it, and it focuses a little bit more around the way that Volcanics play and summoning out that really cool card. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next one. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle it up. And I'm going to cut the deck this time, and let's see what we can get. We're going to go ahead and draw into a Blaze Accelerated Reload, Barrier Statue of Infernos, a Scatter Shot. This is already a great hand. Crackdown, and a copy of Summon Limit. This is an insanely good hand. Now, we didn't get the copy. We did not get the Soul Flare Dragon, but that's fine. It's totally fine. We have other plays in this deck besides that one monster. So we're going to go ahead and set the 3 face down, and we're going to go ahead and normal summon the Barrier Statue of Infernos, because our opponent is going to have to get through this card if they want a special summon, so they're going to have to use their normal summon only to be able to get through this. So when they normal summon against you, you have the copy of Crackdown to be able to take their monster away from them, so they won't have anything else that they can use to swing through it, so you bought yourself a turn. You can also, if you want to, upon normal summoning, you can, instead of activating the Crackdown, you can activate the Blaze Accelerator Reload. We're going to reset that dice, send this to the graveyard, and then once you send it to the graveyard, you will then send again, as consistently as you can, the copies of the Scatter Shots, which will get you an additional 1500 against your opponent, which will do 1500 there, and then you'll be able to draw a card, which is really helpful for this deck to be able to draw additional cards. So we're going to go ahead and draw for turn, or not draw for turn, but draw off the copy of the Blaze Accelerator. And we also have the Summon Limit to be able to stop our opponent if they do get past this copy of Barrier Statue of Infernos, to kind of stop them a little bit more. We draw into the second summon limit. Now, when they pass turn back to us and we draw, we're going to get a Magic Cylinders, which is going to protect it again, because all they're going to be able to do is normal summon. So when they normal summon against us, you can then set the copy. I would probably hold that copy of the summon limit in hand. Go ahead and hold this card in hand. We're going to turn it sideways just to show you guys that is in hand. They're going to go ahead and try and attack. You're going to go ahead and activate the copy of Magic Cylinders. When they attack into it, they're going to take another somewhere in between 1500 to 2000 life points. So we're going to go ahead and just hit it up to the 6 mark. We're just going to say that it was 1500, trying to swing through this. And then we also have the Crackdown for another turn to kind of bait us out for another turn. So we can draw for turn, and there's the Soul Flare. So we can go ahead and normal summon out Soul Flare, and now during our end phase, they're going to take another one. And I will say this is about a little bit more of grinding the game out, which is what's more important about this deck to keep in mind. And after we pass to our opponent's going to be able to use a monster. If their monster is smaller than the Soul Flare Dragon, I can just peck at them with this, or I can grab their monster away from them with Crackdown to be able to attack them directly to do an additional 2500, which would be really helpful, because now at this point, we've done around 6,000 damage to them just off of this field. And then whatever monster they have here, I can then poke them with that monster as well. And then I pass back to you, and you take an additional right here, 500 off of that, so you're already at 65, so you're down to 1,500. So if this monster had anything less than 1,500, you can't attack with the monster, but if you could go ahead and have this on their field to just kind of take it away from them. Now, they can't swing into this, but they can swing into this. But you have the summon limit as well, so you draw for turn. Let's say they out the barrier statue now. We're going to go ahead and draw for turn into Foolish Burial Goods. Go ahead and use that copy of Foolish Burial Goods to send a copy of the Blaze Accelerator to the graveyard, and then now you can banish the copy of the Blaze Accelerator to be able to send from your deck to the graveyard another Volcanic, which is your copy of your Shell, and then Shell can pay 500, and then you get to add another Shell from deck to hand, which is going to help you out a lot. To be able to just add that copy of Shell to your hand is just going to be really nice. And then once you go ahead and send this one to the graveyard, you get an additional draw, which is going to be another Soul Flare, which we pass. God, that's ridiculous. We then pass turn, and if we can inflict 500 points of damage against our opponent anywhere, we can just go ahead and do it this way. Or if you have another level 4 on the field, you can overlay any of these monsters with, like if this was a level 4 that you took with the Crackdown, you can overlay it for a Cowboy with the Crackdown, like the monster that you took for the Crackdown, and inflict 800 against your opponent just for detaching a material, and then pass and basically Cowboy them for game. So that's the simple premise of the way the deck plays, essentially, which is really cool. Again, it's a little bit more of a grind for playing the deck, which is important to keep in mind when you're playing a deck like this, because burn decks are not in for the OTK. We're not in for the OTK, and that's why I wanted to show you guys it that way, because it's a little bit easier to understand the deck if you see the deck work, which is why I love doing these test hands for you guys. And I really like the way that I've been able to take an old school monster and make it work in modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, this card literally came out in Invasion of Chaos. Like, there it is. It literally came out, no, it came out in Ancient Sanctuary. It came out in Ancient Sanctuary, like, in 2004. Like, that is a long time ago that that card came out. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for another test hand. Let's see if we can draw Soul Flare. So we're going to go ahead and draw Foolish Burial Goods, Barrier Statue, ties the, we already got it. We got our copy of Royal Flamesword Guards and a copy of Scattershot. So we've already got set up. We're totally fine. So you can go ahead and normal summon out the copy of the Barrier Statue of Infernos, bait the copy of the Ash if you want to with the Foolish Burial. If they don't hit you with the Ash, you can go ahead and send from your deck to the graveyard the Blaze Accelerator. Once you send that Blaze Accelerator to the graveyard, you can then Ties of the Brethren, pay 2,000 life points, which at this point, we're going to take 2,000, which will be right here. We're going to use this dice right here to symbolize our life points, which we paid 2,000 for the Ties of the Brethren. And then we're going to be able to special summon from our deck 2 more Pyro monsters that are the same level, type, and attribute. So we can special summon a Soul Flare, and we can special summon a Rocket. And the Rocket will go off because when this card is summoned, it goes off, which will grab us from our deck a copy of Reload, which basically at that point, it didn't matter if they ashed the first copy of the Foolish Burial Goods, because guess what? I just got another Reload and I have a Scattershot in hand to blow board. So we're going to go ahead and set. And then once we go ahead and set, we're going to be able to pass turn. We pass to our opponent. Our opponent tries to go off. Oh, they take their 500 off the copy of the Soul Flare. And then we pass. They go. We're going to go ahead and activate the copy of the Reload. Reload's effect will go off mid-turn when they normal summon. Discard the copy of Scattershot. Scattershot will send 2 more from deck to graveyard, which is really cool. That's really bad. Don't let them stack like that. That's really bad. Don't ever let your cards stack like that. So we're gonna go ahead. Oh, that's bad too. We're gonna go ahead and send from the deck to the graveyard 1 more and 2 more scatter shots from deck to grave. And then once you do, they're gonna take an additional 15, which is gonna bring them to 2,000 right there. And then at that point, they don't have a lot of plays. They don't have a lot of choices that they can go for because you just hit them for their 1 normal summon. So we're going to go ahead and draw for turn, and we draw into a Royal Flamesword Guard, which we don't have the total amount that we need in the graveyard to go off with it, but we can normal summon it, and since we board wiped, you can push for game if you need to, which is where you start to get into the OTK of the deck aspect as well, which is a little bit neat. Like, I really like the way this deck came out. I really think that it's relatively powerful for especially being volcanics and then not getting support for however many days. Pain will let you know down in the comments. But it's really cool. Like, I really like the way this deck functions. It's really neat. It's really fun to play, and it's really exciting to be able to play a card like your copy of... That's not it. That's not it. That's not... There it is. Soulflare Dragon. Like, it's really cool to be able to play an old school card like Soulflare Dragon and be able to pop off with it. And like I showed you guys, and I'll probably talk about in the deck profile, you don't super have to have the extra deck. Like, you can basically play like this. If you wanted to include a card in there, like Pot of Extravagance, to make the deck a little bit more expensive, you can. You don't have to, but you can, and it'll help out the deck a little bit with draw power. So that is something if you guys want to consider to make the deck even faster. So that's it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad. And again, thank you, Izzy, for requesting this one. This one took me back down memory lane because I used to have a deck based around Soulflare Dragon a long time ago, like a long time ago. And it's really good. Like, it's still really fun to be able to play a card like that. It's really awesome to be able to just inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent every time they breathe in your turn. And it's really cool. Like, I really like the way the deck came out. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.